Okay, it is 2:15. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Bohlin, who has a PhD in cell and molecular biology from UT Dallas. Is that right? UT Dallas?
Yeah.
And he's published in a lot of journals. He's written books on this subject, but I think most importantly, he has a love for education. So he's spoken on dozens of college campuses and summer camps for students. And this is another opportunity for you to learn about intelligent design on a particular creature, the woodpecker. And I must also say something I know about Dr. Bohlin is that if there's anyone that has a deep love for all creatures, great and small, it is this guy. I'm kind of wishing he was wearing the shirt he had on yesterday that had all sorts of bright and colorful creatures on it. So a fellow creature lover, and he's going to be presenting on the intelligent design of the woodpecker.
Finally, okay.
We're having some glitch.
Well, it seems to have settled down. Okay. All right. I'm Vice President of Probe Ministries, which has been in existence for a little over 50 years, and come this August, I will have been with Probe Ministries for 50 years. It's the only adult job I've ever had, so I wouldn't know where to start to fill out a job application or resume or anything like that. Never had to do it. And I have a book. Probe Ministries has a table here. It's down at the end, towards the end, and we do have my book from '84 called The Natural Limits to Biological Change. I have another book that I edited, but I also wrote most of the chapters in it called Creation, Evolution, and Modern Science. But in my book, Natural Limits, I talked about the woodpecker, but all I talked about was its tongue, which we'll get to eventually, which is quite unusual and amazing, all right? But I have a short video to play that just will introduce a lot of these adaptations that are necessary for the woodpecker to do what it does. So we're going to watch this video, and then I'll expand on that once we're done.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, nature lovers. Today, I'm diving into the fascinating world of one of nature's coolest percussionists. Meet the woodpecker, one of nature's most skilled and fascinating birds, known for its distinctive pecking sound. This bird is not only a master carpenter but also a key player in maintaining the health of our forests. Woodpeckers can peck up to 20 times per second into the wood without damaging themselves or getting a headache. Their anatomy is specialized for their unique behaviors such as pecking, climbing, and foraging. Here's an overview of the key aspects of their anatomy. 1. Beak. The woodpecker's beak is strong, straight, and sharp, resembling a chisel. This allows the bird to drill into hardwood with precision. Unlike most bird beaks, a woodpecker's beak doesn't wear out easily due to its layered construction of tough keratin on the outside and softer tissues beneath. The upper part of the beak is slightly longer than the lower part, which helps them dig into wood more efficiently. 2. Skull. Woodpeckers have thick skulls with spongy bone structures and specialized muscles that cushion the brain from the force of repeated pecking. Their brain is surrounded by a shock-absorbing fluid that helps dissipate the impact. The woodpecker's brain is relatively small, and it is positioned in a way that minimizes rotational forces, which prevents concussions or brain damage. 3. Tongue. A woodpecker's tongue can extend up to 3 times the length of its beak, which is important for reaching deep into tree bark to extract insects. For example, some species have tongues that can extend up to 4 inches. The tongue is either barbed or coated with sticky saliva, depending on the species, allowing the bird to catch and extract insects from narrow crevices. The woodpecker's tongue is anchored at the back of its skull and wraps around its head before exiting the mouth, providing the necessary length for probing deep into the wood. 4. Zygodactyl feet. 2 toes forward, 2 toes backward. This arrangement, called zygodactyl feet, gives woodpeckers a strong grip on tree bark and other vertical surfaces. This is different from many other bird species, which typically have 3 toes forward and 1 backward. Grip. The toes have sharp claws that dig into the bark, allowing the bird to stay upright and stable while pecking or climbing. 5. Tail. The woodpecker's tail feathers are stiff and pointed. They serve as a prop or brace against tree trunks, helping the bird maintain balance while drilling into wood. The central tail feathers are the most rigid and are constantly reinforced by wear and regrowth. The tail, in combination with the feet, provides a 3-point support system that allows woodpeckers to climb up and down tree trunks efficiently. 6. Neck muscles. The woodpecker's neck muscles are incredibly strong, allowing the bird to peck with great force. These muscles control the head's movement, allowing for quick repetitive pecking while maintaining precise control. Some species can peck up to 20 times per second, meaning these muscles must also have great endurance to sustain such rapid movement. 7. Eyes and nictitating membrane. Woodpeckers have a protective, translucent third eyelid called the nictitating membrane. This membrane covers the eyes during pecking to protect them from debris and dust. It also helps prevent the eyes from popping out of the socket during forceful strikes. Their vision is adapted to focus on close-range objects, making it easier for them to target and locate prey inside tree bark. 8. Brain. The woodpecker's brain is tightly packed within the skull, which helps reduce movement during pecking. Its relatively small size means less mass, reducing the likelihood of injury due to impact. The orientation of the brain within the skull reduces rotational forces, which are the most dangerous during rapid head movements. 9. Hyoid apparatus. The hyoid apparatus is a complex structure of bones and muscles that supports the woodpecker's extraordinarily long tongue. This apparatus extends around the skull and acts like a sling, allowing the tongue to extend far beyond the beak when probing into holes. 10. Drumming behavior. While not strictly anatomical, woodpeckers use their anatomy, especially their beak and skull, for drumming. This behavior is a form of communication, used to mark territory, attract mates, or signal danger. Unlike singing birds, woodpeckers drum on resonant surfaces like dead trees, metal, or even house siding to create loud, rhythmic sounds. Why do woodpeckers peck? Mostly they're foraging for food. Their diet primarily consists of insects and larvae found inside trees, but some species also feed on sap or fruit. Include fun behavior facts, such as woodpeckers using their long tongues to pull out ants and larvae from deep inside the wood. Woodpeckers are also expert communicators. Instead of singing like many other birds, they use drumming to communicate with potential mates or warn others to stay away from their territory. Show different woodpecker species unique drumming patterns. Woodpeckers are skilled nest builders, creating hollow cavities in trees to raise their young. These tree cavities not only serve as homes for woodpeckers but are often used by other species once abandoned. You could show how other birds, squirrels, or even bees take over these tree cavities. There are over 240 species of woodpeckers, each with their own unique characteristics. From the tiny downy woodpecker to the majestic pileated woodpecker, these birds come in all shapes and sizes. Woodpeckers play a crucial role in the health of ecosystems. By creating nesting sites and controlling insect populations, they help maintain balanced forest environments. Whether they're feeding, nesting, or drumming, woodpeckers are an essential and awe-inspiring part of nature. Next time you hear that tapping sound, you'll know it's nature's very own carpenter who is hard at work. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more amazing videos.
So, the title is The Common Woodpecker, Chance or Design? Now, I'm going to just run through quickly some of these adaptations with a few photos, and I'll go in a lot more detail. There we go. Well, we talked a little bit about the beak, and we'll go in a bit more detail there.
Assalamu alaikum.
Nope. No. By the way, that's a Muslim video. So, sorry for the intro there. On the left is the North American pileated woodpecker, which was mentioned in the video. On the right is the European green woodpecker. And I want you to notice, as was pointed out in the video, that that has 2 feet up against the bark of the tree. Again, 2 toes in the front, 2 toes in the back. As I said, most birds have 3 toes in the front, 1 toe in the back to grasp a perch. Well, they grasped vertical surfaces, so they need something different. Notice how the tail of each of them is buttressed up against the trunk. Now that does a couple of things. First, it acts like the third leg of a tripod, again to give it stability as it's drumming on the tree. But we'll get a little bit more about that as we go further. Look a little creepy? There you go. That's about 2.5, almost 3 times the length of its beak. And how does it do that? If it's way out there, where do you put it when it comes back in? There's a photo of a skull. And there is a bone inside called the hyoid bone. The film called it hyoid apparatus. And it breaks apart on the other side of the bill, loops around, actually makes a big loop down into the throat. but then it comes back up around the skull, between the skin and the skull, inserts into the right nostril, and in some extends all the way to the tip of the upper beak. So woodpeckers have a problem. They have to do two things at the same time. You have to evolve a longer tongue, and you have to have a retraction mechanism at the same time. Because if you just get a somewhat longer tongue that can actually stick outside the beak, well, you're going to cut it off the first time you go pecking for anything. Well, this didn't quite get done correctly, but if you start over here, okay, then you see the tongue starts here, it goes back, and over here now it comes down, and here's the tip of the tongue, comes back down this way, and comes up around and sticks into the right nostril of the upper beak. Now, woodpeckers sometimes slam their heads in the trees with 1,200 Gs of force. It only takes 100 Gs to cause a concussion in humans. Now, they have a number of adaptations that spread that force around. We've now learned, by the way, this is kind of the old idea, that some recent articles have come out that demonstrate simply because of the much smaller size of the woodpecker brain, it can't generate that much force. It's more like just 400, 500 Gs. Now, what I'm going to show you here next are some statements I gathered from evolutionary websites talking about the woodpecker. Stands as a marvel of evolutionary craftsmanship. Orchestrating a biomechanical symphony. Paints a vivid picture of an evolutionary masterpiece. At the heart of the woodpecker's pecking prowess lies a biomechanical rhythm orchestrated with unparalleled precision. All this happened by chance, you know. The woodpecker's remarkable ability to absorb impact is not a stroke of luck, but a result of millions of years of evolutionary innovation, which requires hundreds of strokes of luck. Yeah, it's not just one. The woodpecker stands as a living embodiment of nature's engineering brilliance. Do you ever think of nature as being brilliant? Oh, apparently these guys it is. Now, I still marvel when I pulled these things out of various articles to show you today, because I read what they've said and said, why don't you get it? You just have this block in your brain that I can talk about craftsmanship, I can talk about symphony, I can talk about masterpiece, unparalleled precision, innovation, engineering brilliance, and design just doesn't enter in. Why? Because we can't. We cannot allow, as one author once said, a divine foot in the door. So, as I talked about, the beak, as I said, is very hard, it's tough, it's shaped like a chisel. If you took any other bird species beak outside of woodpeckers, and if they tried to jam it into a tree, the beak would just break. It can't handle it. So the woodpecker's beak has to be extremely tough. It's mentioned several layers of keratinized structures. Skull. Unlike the skulls of most birds, the woodpecker skull is fortified with specialized bones, spongy tissue. Now we've learned that tissue is not so spongy, forming a natural shock absorber that dissipates the force of each peck. The primary, they mentioned this in the video, talk about the spongy tissue right behind the bill and the very front of the skull. Well, it's not really spongy. It's cancellous bone, which forms a lattice work. And what that does, it distributes the shock, doesn't absorb it, so that a lot of that shock goes up through the top of the skull, goes down through the vertebrae, down into those stiff tail feathers, and back into the tree. Synchronized dance of muscles, tendons, it's also a dance, you know. So. Skeletal structures ensures that each peck contributes to the bird's goal, whether it be foraging for insects or communicating with other woodpeckers. That's something a lot of people don't know. That, as I mentioned in the video briefly, that the woodpecker's drumming is communication. It's how they demonstrate to other woodpeckers in the area that need to be alert, there's a predator around. It advertises to a mate. It also communicates, this is my territory, to other male woodpeckers in the area. And the tongue. Now, as I showed you, the tip of the tongue is out here, and it goes down and it makes a big loop into the throat, up around the back of the head, comes down into the right nostril, inserts itself almost to the end of the beak. And as I mentioned, that's a real evolutionary problem, because you have to do two things at once. You have to evolve a longer beak, and you have to be able to retract it somewhere. Tail. Now, the video mentioned that the tail feathers are very stiff, but they're also anchored in a way that, as I said earlier, a lot of that shock that comes through the upper bill, goes up around the skull, and goes back down the spine and gets returned through the tail into the tree itself. And so you always see again, it's also the third leg of a tripod to help give it stability on the tree. Neck muscles, dynamic interplay between powerful neck muscles, flexible cervical structure. So the cervical structure is also flexible. To achieve rapid and controlled pecking motions, as I said in the video, some woodpeckers can peck 20 times per second. Think about that, 20 times per second. Moving the entire head 20 times per second. This adaptability is stark contrast to some other bird species that may lack the agility required for such percussive feats. And one of my favorites, the nictitating membrane. Specialized adaptation in a form of a nictitating membrane, often referred to as the third eyelid. This translucent protective veil serves as a shield, momentarily covering the eye just before impact. The split-second defense mechanism acts as a safeguard, preventing debris and potential harm from reaching the eye during the intense drilling activities. But what would this poor woodpecker do if it starts pecking in the wood and there's a few wood chips coming out, but it doesn't have a nictitating membrane? You begin to see all these things have to be present at the same time. Otherwise, the woodpecker doesn't survive. Complementing the nictitating membrane is the woodpecker's rapid blink reflex, an astonishingly swift response that further shields the eyes. The ability to blink at an accelerated pace, almost like a protective reflex, adds an extra layer of defense against the perils of rapid pecking. It also prevents the eye from popping out. That would not be a good thing. So they need someone to keep those eyes in there. The brain. They use their bills to excavate holes for raising young, forage for insects, ensconced in dead limbs, and drum to establish territory. To produce the loudest drums, they ram their bills at rapid speeds up to 25 times per second into trees and even utility poles. Ever heard a woodpecker drumming into your wood siding? I've heard a few tell me that story already. Excavating nests happens more slowly but requires more force. Woodpeckers sometimes slam the trees with 12,000 Gs of force, greatly surpassing 100 Gs. As I mentioned, it's no longer that high, just 400 to 500 times. Even though it seems like the birds could be injuring their brains, the results reveal the woodpeckers perform under a safety threshold. Birds would need to either drill twice as fast or hit a much stiffer surface like the metal on a utility pole to incur injury. If this theory gains further support, then it could turn out that there's one simple explanation for how woodpeckers avoid injury. Physics. Somehow woodpeckers have mastered the physics of what's not going to kill them by pecking into trees. Or as I used to like to say, they bang their heads in the trees. They're just strange birds. I mean, who would think to do that? Drumming behavior. I've got a little audio here it's going to play.
This is bird note. Like a jazz player beating out a drum roll, a woodpecker uses its bill to rap out a brisk series of notes. Early spring resounds with the percussive hammering of woodpeckers. Their rhythmic drumming works like many birds' songs. It broadcasts to other woodpeckers over a long distance a clear assertion of territorial and mating rights. We also hear woodpeckers knocking on wood when they're carving holes in trees to create nest cavities or extract insect prey. But these whacks are more methodical. Woodpeckers offer a fascinating cast of drummers. A hefty pileated woodpecker lets go a resounding tattoo against a hollow trunk. A yellow-bellied sapsucker seems to be signaling in Morse code as it snaps its bill against a stub of dead branch. And the little downy woodpecker's drum roll seems rather modest, rather short, and not too fast. For any woodpecker, it's all about proclaiming a sound signal as far and as loud as possible. And as it searches for the most resonant drum, it might just find that your metal rain gutter makes the best music. For Bird Note, I'm Michael Stein.
Some woodpeckers will identify tunnels in the dead tree where there's insect larvae or smaller insects. And so some of them will simply tap until they hear a hollow sound. And that's where they will drill the hole. And that's why they keep banging their heads into gutters. Sounds hollow. Must be some food in there.
This is Bird.
So the quick summary here is that they have an amazing beak, extremely hard, tough, very pointed, chisel-like. The skull, well, it has a number of shock dispersing mechanisms just in the skull alone. Its tongue, as it says, can extend 3 to 5 times the length of the beak. Zygodactyl feet, 2 toes in front, 2 toes in the back, so it can hang onto vertical surfaces, not just a perch. You never see woodpeckers on the perch of a tree. Never. You always see them on a tree trunk or a utility pole. The tail is very strong, very tough. There are strong muscles in the back as well, and where the tail feathers are, and the ones in the center are particularly stiff. Neck muscles, as we talked about, those are extremely strong muscles that generate that kind of force. And they're also, that repeated drumming 20 times per second, there has to be a quick recovery of those muscles as well. The nictitating membrane, as I said, my favorite, a third eyelid that keeps debris from coming into the eye, also helps keep the eyes from popping out. Now the brain is able to absorb the shock, first of all, because it fills nearly the entire internal structure of the skull. There's only a slight layer of fluid. With humans, around our brain is about space of about that big. That a concussion is when you receive a force hard enough that the brain pushes that fluid aside and gets bruised by the skull. Not going to happen with the brain of the woodpecker, because there's just no room to cause a bruise, to get much force there. The brain as well is highly protected, as I just mentioned, and the drumming behavior is just really pretty amazing. And when you hear a woodpecker next time, just start thinking of all these amazing things that God put in place to put them together. And even more so here, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. So something that's true, people are suppressing this truth. 19, since what may be known about God is plain to them. Why? Because God has made it plain to them. He's gone out of his way to make sure this is clear and unmistakable. Verse 20, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, what? Had been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Hence the woodpecker. Now, questions?
No, you keep the mic since we only have one. After
Okay.
the question, if you could just repeat it for the recording.
Okay.
How much food does a woodpecker eat per day?
How much wood? The woodpecker doesn't eat wood. How much food? Oh. Yeah, the OOD fooled me there. So, yeah, that's really hard to say, especially if they're raising young. They have to extract a lot more insects than they ordinarily would need themselves. But I couldn't even, I'd say probably about 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 grams worth or more. They don't have a big body, so they don't need a lot of food to support all that. Yeah.
Any other birds with a nictitating membrane?
No, other than woodpeckers, no.
Repeat the question.
Oh, any other birds with a nictitating membrane? As far as I know, that doesn't exist. So woodpeckers are the only birds that need it. Yeah, in the back.
I might have just missed this, but I didn't quite understand what is doing the pulling on the tongue, and like what makes it pull and go back. Like, is there like a?
Well, the question is, what makes the tongue move back and forth? How does it accomplish that? Well, there are definitely various muscle attachments that can, well, for instance, in the upper part of the beak, it can attach to the tip of the upper part of the beak, but it releases that and reattaches between the skull. So there are different attachment places that can release to allow the tongue to extend out. When you bring it back in, those attachment places, again, start lining up until it gets all the way back in. Yeah.
Did the nictitating membranes go front to back? From what I could tell, couldn't tell from the picture, but it was halfway there. Seems like it'd make more sense than if it went like this.
Yeah, the nictitating membranes are different in different species. For some of them, they kind of come from above and below and just close almost like a third eyelid. And for others, there can be just kind of a slip back, and there's no two different parts. It depends on the species.
Do they migrate?
Does what migrate?
The birds.
Woodpeckers. Oh, no, not really. They can be year-round inhabitants of the forest because there are always going to be insects in those trees.
I noticed most photos of woodpeckers, their head, they have some red either on their head, on their body. Is there a purpose for the red color?
Is there a purpose for the red color of most woodpecker heads? It's a good question. I haven't really looked that up, but I would suspect that it's a very important warning signal that a woodpecker's in the area, especially when they're drumming, because that red starts flashing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And if you would think of, say, trying to think what kind of predator might be in the trees, but that could also be a warning to them. There's a woodpecker here, and also help attracting a mate.
Are most of them like the downy woodpecker, for instance, it's only the male that has the red?
Only the male has the
I'm
red.
wondering, is that true across all of them? Like the
No.
pileated?
The pileated, they all basically look the same.
Okay.
There's not much dimorphology there. So for some, the male and female are different with the red on the head, others not. Yeah. Do any of the birds have longer tongues? No. Woodpecker has the longest tongue. Yes.
Has someone studied the DNA, translating proteins that are needed to support these functions? Like
Those kind of studies have not been done yet. Oh, He's asking if there's been any research into the genetic structure for all of these different adaptations. As far as I know, there isn't anything. It's a good research project for somebody out here if you want to go into ornithology. Yes, back there.
Yeah, this nictitating eyelid, does it also come out and retract 20 times a second?
Yes. For every, well, he's asking about the nictitating membrane. Does it open and shut for each peck? The nictitating membrane opens and shuts. So it's also happening 20 times per second. Yeah.
Do they use the pecking against enemies or predators?
Do they use the pecking against enemies or predators? Yeah, some of that drumming behavior is to warn predators away.
But they don't use it on the predator?
No, they do not use it on the predator, yeah. They just fly away. Yes, then back.
So that third eyelid, does that work perfectly so nothing gets in? And if something does get in, how would they get like that piece of wood out?
So the question again is about the nictitating membrane, that third eyelid, and does it always work? And what would they do if something actually did get in there? Well, as far as I can tell from the research I've done here, it's always working. The fact that it closes for each peck tells you that it's all, as I said also, it's a reflex reaction. So as soon as the head starts to head toward the tree, eyelid closes. So it's closed as the beak makes contact with the wood. So how would they get rid of it? I have no idea, because I suppose maybe there's extra fluid behind it that would come out, kind of like tears, that could help wash it away. But my understanding is that something rarely gets past the nictitating membrane.
So when you mentioned the rapid blink reflex,
Yeah.
is that the same as the third eyelid, or is it?
Yeah, that's the third eyelid. Again, it's a rapid blink, and as it says, it's a reflex. So the bird does not do that intentionally. It simply happens. Yes?
When the woodpecker's tongue is all the way back in its head, can it still swallow? Or does it have to stick its tongue out?
When the woodpecker's tongue is all the way back in its mouth, can it still swallow? Absolutely, because the insects don't get into the bill until the tongue comes all the way in. So they have to be able to swallow once that happens. Yep. Yes.
You've been talking about woodpeckers who eat insects. Now, the woodpeckers who come to my backyard are seed eaters. So you've got herbivores and you've got carnivores. Do you have any omnivoric woodpeckers?
Omnivoric woodpeckers. I'm not sure. I would definitely have to look that up. But that is an interesting question. Well, even woodpeckers, when they eat seeds, they're not going to really break a seed open. If you put sunflower seed germs out, they will eat those because they can just put them in their mouth and swallow it. If they have to crack a seed open, they're not going to do that very well. Yes?
What's the lifespan of a woodpecker? How long do they live? How many babies do they have every year?
The average, the age of a woodpecker tends to be around 4 to 6 years. And they may be able to raise maybe 3 or 4 broods in that time span.
So about 1 or 2 years?
Yeah, only once a year. Most birds, it's just once a year.
How many babies do they have?
How many babies do they have? Well, you saw one of those nests in the video. It had 3. Yeah, they had 3 little mouths, very, very hungry little mouths.
So why do you call the nictitating membrane the third eyelid if they have 2 others?
Well, they have, like we do, an eyelid on top and one on bottom. They have a major eyelid like we do. But the nictitating membrane is a third eyelid inside of those, inside of the normal eyelids.
So the normal eyelids don't blink?
No. With that video I showed you,
I didn't see it.
again, let me see. We can probably get back to that. Yeah, that's just a photo. But what you can see here, here's the upper eyelid, okay? And there's the one behind it, but what's below it is the nictitating membrane. Now, they're not mammals, so they don't really have the same kind of eyelids that we do. They're different. For instance, they probably don't have eyelashes, they don't have eyebrows, no hair sticking out there. But I guess it was just in the video that we saw that. Yeah. Okay. That was the video. I forgot I put it in the front of my PowerPoint. Anything else?
Yeah.
No.
I assume you're a birder.
I have been. I'm 71 years old, so I haven't done it for a while.
I read an article in Outside Magazine recently. There's one guy hoping to become the first person to identify 10,000 birds. Imagine that.
You have to travel the world to do that and go into some... oh, he's asking about, you mentioning a person who had wants to be the first person to see 10,000 birds. Well, you'd also have to spend lots of times in tropical forests, not just in South America, but in Africa, Indonesia, and any place where you find tropical forests, because that's where the large number of bird species are. And when you get under the canopy of a tropical jungle, there isn't a whole lot of sunlight to be able to identify all the varying color markings and so on. So that's quite a task. I wouldn't even try. Yes, ma'am.
Just a comment. Thank you very much. This was really informative. But a couple of years ago, we used to live in the Pacific Northwest, and we had very high windows, and we had a tiny northern flicker hit our window. I went out, and I have to say what your scripture put there. Just this bird had the most beautiful, perfectly round cheeks that were just like a tangerine red, and it was alive at first, and then it died right then, and the tongue released. It was the tiniest little, like if you could imagine this teeny little worm, and at the very end of it was about 1/4 of an inch needle.
Yes.
And I'm not kidding, I was just like in
It's
awe. It's just, it was amazing.
Kind of like that.
So,
Tiny needle. Well, she's mentioning, we said it was a red-bellied flicker? Northern flicker, okay. Yeah, I haven't seen one of those, but it just hung around your house?
No, it hit the window.
Oh, it flew into the window and died.
Yeah.
And the tongue stuck out.
I was sad that it died, but at the same time, to see that beautiful creation was
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yes, sir.
So in part of the video, you had the woodpeckers inserting acorns into their holes or some kind of nut. Why would they
Yes.
doing that?
Well, again, it's a storage facility. They would have to, as you can see, those acorns were much larger than the bill. So they would have to smash those up a little bit to be able to pull down the acorn. It's just storage.
Woodpecker?
It's just storage, yeah.
What's the rarest woodpecker, and have you seen one?
The rarest. What's the rarest woodpecker, and have I seen one? Oh, you know?
I know, but there was a big deal about something called the ivory-billed woodpecker.
Ivory-billed is,
Existed or not a few years
well, it's thought to be extinct, but in southeastern Missouri are some fairly deep woods that some birders have reported seeing an ivory-billed woodpecker. They haven't been able to confirm it. One person sees it, doesn't mean that's what it is. It has to be confirmed. Yes.
Back to the evolutionist theories. I just came from the whale
Oh, yeah.
talk, which was really great, and it seemed that for that theory to be true, two things had to happen
Yeah.
in a short amount of time that's supposed to take a long amount of time for that theory to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Is kind of what I gathered.
Mm-hmm.
The evolutionists were saying that this is like a marvel
Yeah.
for evolution. I'm assuming this is one of the most adaptive creatures if you're going to run with that theory. But is it problematic? In what ways does it support their theory for there to be so many adaptations at one time for this creature to just miraculously be so adept for what it does?
Well, it doesn't fit the theory. That's the point of Dr. Sternberg's presentation and this one here. When you have to have the thick, hard, chiseled beak, you have to have a tongue that can extend outside the beak. You need a retraction mechanism. You need cancellous bone behind the beak to help spread the force of the shock. You need stiff tail feathers. You need the zygomatic feet, zygodactyl feet. So yeah, all those things have to come about almost all at the same time. Because if you can't hold yourself upright on a vertical surface, you're not going to drill into anything. If you're only going to go to a log on the surface and use a regular 3 toes in front, 1 toe in back, you're not going to get much down there because those trees are dead. There'll be some insects, but not worth the effort.
So what they say is evolutionary craftsmanship, you say is problematic to their theory.
Yeah. Why they don't see it? It's because there's a blind spot. They are suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. Are we done?
We've got time for one more.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
What's their closest relatives?
Oh.
Question?
What's their closest relatives, woodpeckers? I really don't know. I'll have to check that out.
Is a flicker a woodpecker?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm a slow learner. I'm a retired physician, and I did nuclear power before that. The thing is, the response to this question is, it ain't going to happen. So the nuclear power submarine, it did not come into existence by itself. And
Chance didn't have much to do with that?
People didn't come into existence by themselves, and woodpeckers didn't either.
That's a good mic drop question. Thank you.
Just the amazing thing about the quotes is they recognize that.
Yes, they do.
All the language they're using.
They're seeing design.
Right, but they don't want to see it.
They just can't call it that if they want to keep their position. One last question, I think.
Do you know if hummingbirds that have very long tongues operate the same way?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they do with their tongue when it comes back in.
That'll be next year's talk.
Next year's talk. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you, Ray.
Okay.